Narcissists rarely change unless they choose to. That's one of the hardest truths to face when you're in love with someone who refuses to acknowledge their behavior. You may spend months or even years trying to be the catalyst for their change, thinking that if you just love them enough, they'll eventually see the light. But change doesn't happen through pleading, ultimatums, or emotional breakdowns. It happens when someone looks in the mirror and sees the problem clearly and wants to do something about it. If he doesn't see a problem with how he treats you, no amount of your effort will ever be enough to inspire growth. Many people in relationships with narcissists become trapped in a cycle of hope and disappointment. They hang on to the idea of who the person could become rather than accepting who they actually are. It's easy to remember the early days when things felt magical, when the charm was high and the promises were flowing. But those moments are often used as bait to keep you engaged, to make you second, guess yourself, and to offer false hope. You have to ask yourself if you're in love with the person in front of you or with the potential they continue to promise but never fulfill. The idea that love can fix someone is deeply romanticized but dangerously misleading. You are not a therapist, a fixer, or a savior. If someone continually deflects blame, gaslights your emotions, or refuses to take responsibility for their actions, they are showing you that they are committed to staying the same. True change requires humility, introspection, and action. A narcissist by nature struggles with all three. So unless they choose to confront themselves and seek help, you will continue to be stuck in a toxic cycle where you do all the emotional labor and they reap all the control. It's also important to recognize that their refusal to change is not your failure. You did not cause this behavior, and it's not your job to fix it. Taking responsibility for someone else's growth will leave you emotionally bankrupt. You may think that if you just hang on a little longer, if you try one more thing, the breakthrough will come. But the longer you stay in denial, the more you delay your own healing. Waiting for someone to change while they actively deny theirs, a problem is like standing in the rain hoping the storm will apologize. You'll just end up soaked and disappointed. Staying in a relationship with a narcissist who won't change can cause you to lose sight of who you are. You start walking on eggshells, doubting your instincts, and shrinking yourself to avoid conflict. Over time, your identity becomes wrapped up in trying to keep the peace, and you forget what it feels like to live freely. That's not love, it's emotional captivity. A healthy relationship empowers both people. It encourages growth, mutual respect, and honest communication. If your partner can't or won't give you that, then you have to consider whether staying is a form of self-betrayal. Every time you excuse the bad behavior or silence your own needs to avoid being criticized, you reinforce the very dynamic you want to escape. The truth is, someone who doesn't respect your boundaries when you're dating isn't suddenly going to respect them after marriage, children, or shared investments. The stakes only get higher and the damage runs deeper. If he's not doing the work now, ask yourself why you believe he'll ever start. If nothing changes, and that includes you, unless you decide to take your power back and make a different choice. You deserve a relationship where your voice matters and your emotional safety is non-negotiable. Hoping for change is not the same as seeing real, consistent effort. If you've communicated your pain and been met with denial, blame, or manipulation, then the message is clear. He is not ready to change, and that means you're the one who has to decide what's next. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't love him. It means you finally started loving yourself more. And sometimes the most powerful step forward begins when you stop waiting and start walking. Love doesn't require self-sacrifice. Real love allows room for both people to grow, express themselves, and feel secure. If you're constantly compromising your values, ignoring your needs, or changing who you are just to keep the peace, that's not love, it's fear. fear of conflict, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. A relationship should never make you feel like you're slowly disappearing just to keep someone else happy. When your presence in the relationship is conditional upon silence, submission, or suppression, it's time to question whether this is love or control. A narcissistic partner often thrives on your willingness to give too much. The more you bend, the more they take. They may praise your loyalty while punishing your independence. You'll find yourself walking a tightrope, trying not to upset them while slowly forgetting what you even believe in. That's not partnership, that's power imbalance. When one person's needs, feelings, and decisions always come first, it creates a toxic dynamic where the other person slowly fades into the background, unnoticed and unheard. And love, by definition, should never erase you. Sometimes you stay because you keep remembering the few moments where he was kind, when he apologized, or when things felt good again, but that's how the cycle traps you. There are just enough moments of sweetness to keep you hanging on, and just enough denial to make you question your perception. This cycle of confusion creates emotional dependency. You keep thinking if you just do one more thing right, maybe you'll finally earn his approval, his change, his consistency, but that chase will exhaust you. It's not your job to constantly perform for the right to be loved. Real intimacy cannot grow in a space where one person dominates and the other survives. If your relationship feels like a battlefield where you're constantly trying to keep peace while sacrificing your truth, you've already lost something vital. A relationship worth keeping doesn't require losing your voice to avoid an argument or hiding your emotions to maintain harmony. You deserve someone who can sit in the discomfort of growth and still choose to honor you, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. And if that person won't do that, then staying becomes a form of self-abandonment. It's important to ask yourself why you're staying. Is it love or is it fear? Is it loyalty or is it guilt? Are you staying because you believe he can change or because you're afraid of starting over? The truth is, staying in a relationship that slowly depletes your self-worth will only delay the pain, it won't prevent it. You can hope, you can pray, and you can wait, but if he's not showing effort, accountability, and action, then you're only extending your suffering. Love is not proven by how much pain you can tolerate. It's shown by how much peace you're willing to demand. There's nothing wrong with wanting love, connection, and understanding, but when you accept emotional crumbs in exchange for your loyalty, you teach yourself that survival is enough. You were not born to survive in a relationship. You were born to thrive, to grow, and to be seen. You deserve to be with someone who values your peace more than their pride, who listens when you speak, and who wants to grow, not just for you, but with you. If your relationship doesn't allow space for your full self, then it may be time to step away and reclaim your voice. Letting go doesn't mean you failed. It means you recognize that you matter too. It takes courage to leave someone you love, especially when you've tried everything to make it work. But love without respect, empathy, or accountability is not love that will sustain you. When you finally choose yourself, you're not being selfish, you're being brave. Because the first step toward a healthier life is deciding you no longer want to live in emotional survival mode. You want more, and that is the most powerful kind of love there is, the kind you give back to yourself. You cannot fix what you didn't break. No matter how much you care, how deeply you love, or how much time you've already invested, you are not responsible for repairing someone else's emotional damage, especially when they don't even admit there's anything wrong. It's a painful truth, but one that can liberate you if you're willing to accept it. Trying to fix someone who refuses to see the need for change will only drag you down emotionally and mentally. You end up carrying a burden that was never yours to begin with, all while losing your sense of self in the process. A relationship is supposed to be a mutual effort. If you're the only one doing the work, overthinking every conversation, apologizing for things you didn't do, trying to manage his moods, then that's not a partnership. That's emotional labor without compensation. You become the caretaker, the peacemaker, the fixer, and eventually the one who's exhausted beyond words. When someone won't meet you halfway, it's not because you didn't try hard enough. It's because they chose not to show up. And that choice speaks louder than any promise they've ever made. You may find yourself making excuses for his behavior, especially when no one else understands why you stay. You tell yourself he had a rough childhood, or that he's under stress, or that deep down, he's a good person. And maybe all of that is true, but none of those reasons give him the right to hurt you, ignore your needs, or control the narrative of your relationship. Compassion is a beautiful trait, but when it blinds you to repeated patterns of harm, it turns into a trap. You can have empathy for someone's pain without sacrificing your own healing. When you take on the responsibility of fixing him, you also take on the blame when things don't improve. Suddenly, it's your fault he's angry, your fault he shuts down, your fault the relationship is strained. That kind of thinking is not only unfair, it's deeply damaging. It teaches you to carry shame that doesn't belong to you. You weren't put on this earth to absorb someone else's emotional dysfunction. You're not a sponge for their insecurities. You're a person with your own needs, boundaries, and dreams, and those matter just as much. Trying to fix him often becomes a distraction from fixing yourself. You pour so much energy into trying to change him that you forget to look at what you've become in the process. Are you happier? Are you more confident? Do you feel safe and supported? Or are you constantly anxious, drained, and unsure of your worth? If the answer is the latter, then the relationship isn't helping you grow. It's stunting you. You can't be whole when you're constantly breaking yourself into pieces for someone else. Healing can't happen in the same environment that keeps wounding you. If he won't go to therapy, won't own his behavior, and won't take steps to be better, then you're stuck in a loop of pain. You may think your love is strong enough to break the cycle, but love alone isn't enough. There has to be accountability, vulnerability, and effort. Without those things, your love becomes a lifeline he doesn't even want to grab, and over time, you're just left dangling, waiting for a rescue that never comes. You didn't cause his pain, and it's not your duty to fix it. Letting go doesn't mean you're giving up on him. It means you're choosing not to give up on yourself. It means you're no longer willing to be the emotional sponge for someone who won't do the work. You're choosing to step away from dysfunction toward clarity, and the moment you stop trying to fix what you didn't break is the moment you begin to truly heal, because healing doesn't come from saving someone else. It comes from finally deciding to save yourself. Emotional abuse is still abuse, even if there are no bruises or broken bones. The pain it causes runs deep, often leaving invisible scars that take years to understand and even longer to heal. Just because someone doesn't yell or hit doesn't mean they aren't harming you. Dismissive comments, manipulation, guilt, tripping, and constant criticism are just as damaging. In many cases, emotional abuse chips away at your self-worth until you're no longer sure of what's real or how you're supposed to feel. You may find yourself walking on eggshells, constantly trying to avoid upsetting them, unsure of when the next emotional blow will come. What makes emotional abuse so dangerous is how subtle it can be. It doesn't always start with obvious cruelty. It begins with little comments that make you doubt yourself, subtle digs disguised as jokes, or blaming you for things that have nothing to do with you. Over time, those small jabs turn into patterns. You start to question your memory, your reactions, and even your reality. You might hear things like, "You're too sensitive," or "You're overreacting," whenever you try to express hurt. This is gaslighting, and it's a way to make you feel like the problem instead of the person causing the pain. One of the cruelest parts of emotional abuse is how it isolates you. The abuser often tries to cut you off from your support system, whether directly or indirectly. They might criticize your friends, question your family's intentions, or make you feel guilty for spending time with anyone but them. Eventually, you begin to pull away from the people who care about you, either because you're too embarrassed to share what's happening or because you've been convinced that they don't really understand. This isolation makes it even harder to see the abuse for what it is, and even harder to leave. You might find yourself trying harder and harder to please them, believing that if you could just do things right, the relationship would finally be peaceful. But with emotional abuse, the goalposts keep moving. What pleased them yesterday angers them today. What made them happy last week now gets ignored. It creates an exhausting cycle where you constantly perform for approval but never feel secure. That's not love, that's control, and the longer you stay, the more your confidence erodes until you're not sure who you are anymore without their approval. It's also important to recognize that emotional abuse doesn't only happen during fights or dramatic moments. It's in the silent treatment that lasts for days. It's in the passive-aggressive comments, the looks of contempt, the dismissive tone. It's the way they make you feel invisible when you're upset, and then accuse you of being dramatic when you speak up. These actions might seem small in isolation, but when they happen repeatedly, they form a pattern that's meant to dominate, not relate. Healthy relationships involve mutual respect and empathy, not power games. Many people stay in emotionally abusive relationships because they've been convinced they are the problem. If you've been told over and over that you're too emotional, too needy, or too difficult, you might start to believe it. But someone else's inability to handle your emotions or meet your needs does not make you too much. It means they're unwilling or incapable of showing up in the way a partner should. You are not too much. You are asking for the bare minimum, respect, kindness, and consideration. And if that's met with cruelty or indifference, it's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their failure. Choosing to leave an emotionally abusive relationship is not easy. There may be guilt, fear, and even doubt. You may wonder if you're overreacting or if things will get better. But deep down, you already know the truth. If someone consistently makes you feel small, confused, anxious, or worthless, that's not love, it's abuse. And you don't need anyone else's permission to walk away from that. You deserve a relationship that lifts you up, not one that breaks you down. Healing begins the moment you choose yourself, and that choice might be the most courageous thing you'll ever do. You've got to stop writing potential checks you can't cash. That means stop investing in who someone could be and start accepting who they actually are. In relationships, we often hold on to the potential we see in someone, the version of them we imagine they could become if they just tried a little harder, healed a little deeper, or loved us a little more. But living in that illusion will break you. You're not dating the idea of who he could be. You're dating the reality of who he is. And if who he is today brings more pain than peace, you've already got your answer. Holding on to potential is like emotionally financing a future that has no promise of ever being delivered. You keep showing up, giving your all, waiting for that big emotional payout that never comes. And just like a check that bounces, the disappointment stings every single time. Eventually, your emotional account runs dry, and you're left depleted, wondering why love feels like a debt you can never repay. That's because you've been paying for someone else's growth with your own well-being, and that's not sustainable. We fall into this trap because we believe our loyalty can transform someone. We think our love, our patience, and our effort can heal them into the partner we need. But the truth is, no matter how much love you give, you can't force someone to grow. Growth is an inside job. You can support it, witness it, and celebrate it, but you cannot manufacture it for someone who's unwilling to do the work. Waiting for a narcissistic partner to suddenly have empathy or accountability is like waiting for a drought to bring rain. You can hope, but you cannot survive on it. The longer you stay hoping they'll change, the more you abandon yourself in the process. You start ignoring your own red flags, silencing your needs, and betraying your intuition. Every time you forgive without change, every time you minimize your pain, you write another check in their name that only you end up paying for. And what you lose isn't just time, it's self-respect, inner peace, and trust in your own judgment. That price is too high, especially when the return is so low. You've got to stop seeing potential as a promise. Potential is just possibility. It's not commitment, it's not action, and it's definitely not a plan. Someone who truly wants to grow will show you, not with words, not with temporary changes, but with consistent effort and real accountability. If you have to keep reminding them how to treat you, if you keep begging for basic respect, then what you have isn't love, it's emotional survival, and love shouldn't feel like a war you're constantly losing. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, not because you didn't care, but because you finally realized you deserve more. You deserve someone who shows up fully, not halfway, someone who gives love without conditions, listens without dismissing, and grows without being forced. When you stop writing those emotional checks, you start investing in yourself. You shift the energy you've been pouring into someone else and begin refueling your own life, your dreams, and your peace. In the end, it's not about what they could become, it's about what you're becoming by staying. If staying keeps you stuck, silenced, and small, then leaving is not giving up. It's choosing yourself, and when you choose yourself, you don't need potential to be enough. You become the promise, you become the investment, and you become the one who finally stops waiting and starts living. Fear of being alone is not a reason to stay. That fear can be powerful, convincing you that life without this relationship will be emptier, lonelier, or somehow less meaningful. But staying in a connection that drains you simply because the idea of being alone scares you is not a solution. It's a slow erosion of your spirit. Loneliness may feel heavy at first, but it's nothing compared to the emotional exhaustion of begging for attention, love, or respect from someone unwilling to give it freely. The quiet of solitude has healing in it, but the noise of a toxic relationship only deepens your wounds. Sometimes we mistake connection for safety, even when that connection is hurting us. You may have convinced yourself that something is better than nothing, that it's better to have someone beside you, even if that someone belittles you, ignores your feelings, or makes you question your worth. But true companionship should never come at the cost of your peace. If being with someone makes you feel lonelier than being by yourself, then you're not really avoiding loneliness. You're just masking it with chaos, and that kind of company will never satisfy your soul. The fear of starting over is real. It's natural to worry about what life will look like without this relationship, especially if it's been a long time or if your identity has become tied to your partner. But you don't rebuild your life by clinging to something that's broken. You rebuild by stepping into the unknown, one honest decision at a time. You discover new parts of yourself, new strengths you never knew you had, and new people who can actually meet you where you are. The end of one chapter doesn't mean your story is over. It means you finally get to write it on your terms. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Alone is a physical state, lonely is an emotional one. You can be alone and feel full, grounded, and content, and you can be in a relationship and feel completely invisible. If your fear of being alone keeps you in a place where you are constantly invalidated or mistreated, you're not avoiding loneliness, you're living in it daily. And what you need is not just someone beside you, but someone who truly sees you, hears you, and honors your presence. Choosing to leave doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally realized that you were meant for more than emotional scraps. It means you stopped accepting a version of love that came with conditions, excuses, or cycles of hurt. You can grieve what was and still move forward. You can be afraid and still take the first step. And every step you take away from dysfunction brings you closer to the peace you've been craving. The kind that only comes when you stop settling and start choosing yourself. The idea that being single is worse than being in a bad relationship is a myth. In truth, singleness is a sacred space, a season where you can focus on healing, rediscovery, and rebuilding. It's a chance to reconnect with your voice, your values, and your vision for what love should look like. You're not abandoning love. You're preparing for a love that actually aligns with your worth. And that preparation happens in the stillness, in the solitude, and in the bravery of choosing not to settle for anything less. You deserve a relationship that brings out your best, not your anxiety, one that feels like peace, not a battlefield. Staying out of fear of being alone will only keep you stuck in pain disguised as partnership. But choosing yourself, even when it's hard, is the beginning of freedom. You are not too broken to start over. You are not too late to find joy, and you are absolutely not meant to shrink just to fit into someone else's limited idea of love. You are meant to expand, to shine, and to stand tall. Whether you're with someone or standing on your own, ask yourself, is this sustainable, not just today, not just this week, but long term? Can you see yourself living in this emotional environment for the next year, 5 years, or the rest of your life? If the relationship already feels heavy now, if you're already tired, anxious, or constantly doubting yourself, imagine how that weight multiplies over time. People don't magically wake up one day with a new personality. If he's not changing now when you're hurting, when you've asked, begged, or pleaded, what makes you believe he will change later? The version of him you're with today may very well be the most effort he's capable or willing to give. Sustainability in a relationship isn't just about logistics or convenience. It's about emotional safety. It's about whether your heart, your voice, and your boundaries can survive in this space. If you're constantly adjusting yourself to avoid arguments, filtering your words to avoid backlash, or sacrificing your peace just to keep him calm, that's not sustainable. That's survival mode. You weren't created to live your life in survival mode just to make someone else comfortable. You deserve a relationship where your presence is enough, where your needs aren't treated like burdens, and where love isn't conditional on your silence. Ask yourself if you feel safe expressing your truth. In a sustainable relationship, you don't fear consequences for being honest. You don't shrink yourself to maintain peace. You don't apologize for having feelings. If your emotional needs are consistently unmet or dismissed, then this relationship is taking more from you than it gives. Love should not feel like a negotiation where only one party ever gets heard. If you have to suppress your identity just to maintain a false sense of harmony, you'll lose yourself in the process, and losing yourself is too high a price to pay for love. Think about your future self. Would she thank you for staying, or would she wish you had walked away sooner? Picture the version of you 5 years from now. Do you see her thriving in this relationship, or still stuck trying to fix something that's only falling apart in new ways? We often overestimate what we can change in someone else and underestimate what it's costing us. Staying in something unsustainable just delays the inevitable truth. Things don't get better when only one person is trying. They only get heavier. You also have to consider what message you're sending to yourself by staying. Every time you accept less than you deserve, you teach yourself that your needs don't matter. Every time you settle for temporary peace instead of long-term respect, you reinforce the idea that love means struggle. But love should not be defined by how much pain you can endure. Love should be defined by how much peace it brings, how much growth it nurtures, and how freely it flows. If it constantly hurts, it's not love, it's a lesson. Staying in something unsustainable isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment. True loyalty begins with you being loyal to yourself, your well-being, your future, and your truth. It means recognizing when a situation no longer serves you, no longer respects you, and no longer aligns with who you're becoming. Walking away doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest, and honesty with yourself is the foundation of every meaningful change you'll ever make. So ask yourself again, is this sustainable? If the answer is no, then it's time to stop surviving and start living. Time to stop hoping someone else will save the relationship and start saving yourself. The longer you wait for someone to become who they're not, the more time you lose becoming who you truly are. You are allowed to choose peace over potential. You are allowed to walk away from chaos. And most importantly, you are allowed to be free. You already know the answer. You're just afraid to act on it. That truth sits quietly in your gut, in the silence after the fights, in the moments when you cry yourself to sleep, wondering how love got so complicated. Deep down, you've known for a while that this relationship is no longer healthy, no longer nurturing, and no longer serving who you're becoming. But fear has a way of convincing us to stay still. It tells us that the unknown is scarier than the pain we already know. And so we wait. We wait for something to change, for someone to wake up, for the courage to finally break free. Fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers just enough doubt to keep you stuck. What if it's your fault? What if no one else will love you? What if leaving is a mistake? That's how fear operates. It makes comfort out of chaos and security out of suffering. But fear is not truth. Truth is what you feel when you're completely honest with yourself, when you take away the noise, the excuses, and the hope for something that continues to disappoint. And your truth is telling you, this isn't working. This isn't love. This isn't safe. Acting on what you already know doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you forget the good moments or deny that there was once something beautiful. It simply means you're choosing to stop letting love be defined by how much pain you can tolerate. You're choosing to stop carrying the weight of someone else's unhealed trauma. And you're choosing to stop being the one who always bends, always fixes, always forgives without change. You deserve to be loved in a way that doesn't hurt. There will be a moment, quiet, simple, and clear, when you realize you're done, not because you stopped loving him, but because you finally started loving yourself. You won't need a dramatic ending or a final straw. You'll just feel a shift. You'll feel tired in a different way, tired of trying, tired of hoping, tired of explaining the same things over and over. And in that tiredness, you'll find your power, because being done doesn't mean giving up. It means beginning again. Yes, leaving is hard. It means grieving not just the person, but the future you imagined. It means sitting with your own fears, your own loneliness, and your own guilt. But leaving is also an act of courage. It is the moment you choose clarity over confusion, self, worth over attachment, and freedom over fear. It is the beginning of returning home to yourself, piece by piece, until you remember who you were before you started begging someone else to see your value. You will question yourself, that's normal. You will wonder if you did the right thing, if maybe he'll change now that you're gone, if you should have stayed longer. But growth comes with discomfort, and the pain of healing is temporary. The pain of staying in something that slowly destroys your spirit is not. Every day that you choose yourself, even in small ways, you rebuild your confidence, your strength, and your future. You become the version of you who no longer waits for love to be earned, because you already know you're worthy of it. You don't need permission to leave. You don't need anyone else to validate your experience. If you know it's no longer healthy, if you know it's slowly breaking you down, then it's time. Trust what you already know, act on it. Your life doesn't begin when someone else gets it together. It begins when you do. And the moment you stop waiting and start walking, you create space for peace, for healing, and for the love that was meant for you all along.